Okay, so I've had a couple of people ask me recently about how to play blues with a walking bass line. So what I've done for you today is work up an improvisation based on a 12-bar blues in F with a fairly steady walking bass. Okay, what I'm going to do is play it through 2 or 3 times and then talk about what I was doing, so hopefully you'll be able to do something similar yourself. Now you'll find this useful if you are, of course, interested in blues, but also if you're just getting started with any sort of improvisation. If you've got my book, How to Really Play the Piano, you'll know that I think blues is a fantastic way of starting to improvise because it kind of gives you a very clear framework, just to get started in. So even if you're not massively interested in blues piano, if you're just working on your improvisation in general, stick around because you should find this useful. Let's have a look at the improvisation. You'll notice that I put the chords in subtitles, by the way. That's because if you watch it again, as I hope you will, I want you to be able to kind of follow where the harmony is. If you're really new to 12-bar blues, you may not be aware that basically any 12-bar, any basic 12-bar, there are variations, but any basic 12-bar just uses 3 chords. And if we're in the key of F, those chords are going to be F, the number 1 chord, B flat, the number 4 chord, and C, the number 5 chord. And there might be variations and various other bits and pieces. So at the end of that progression, I included a little turnaround: F, F7, B flat minor, and back to C. Really common blues turnaround to take you back to the start of the progression. But basically the 12-bar is all about those 3 chords. The 1, the 4 and the 5 chords: F, B flat and C in the key of F major. Now, when I was playing that particular improvisation, you probably noticed that I kind of got more complex as it went along. So I started off with quite basic chord shapes, playing them rhythmically in the right hand, okay, over my walking bass. Then the second time through, I played quite a limited melodic improvisation, just using these notes. And then third time through, I went a little bit wild and expanded my melodic improvisation. And I'll talk about all those stages in a second, but first of all, I just want to focus on what was going on in the left hand, okay? Because the essence of walking bass is this, single note at a time. But what the walking bass line does, and if you're improvising a walking bass, you really need to understand this, is kind of outline the chords, yeah? So when we had an F chord in the harmony, that was what was going on, okay? The basic shape that I'm outlining there is F7, okay? We've got that D as a passing note, but that's basically an F7 chord, okay? Okay, when we got to the B flat chord, we outlined B flat 7 and back to F7, okay, for that nice funky bluesy sound on the flat 7th there. And then with the C, okay, because we've only got 1 bar of it, 1 measure of it, we only get that far. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, back to the B flat, and then we have the turnaround F, F7, B flat minor, which I'm just kind of hinting at using that little kind of chromatic progression down to see at the end. Just a couple of things to bear in mind about that walking bass line. First of all, if you're going to work on this blues, what I would do to start with, especially if you're relatively new to this kind of thing, is really practice that bass line just by itself. Okay, you kind of need to get that really kind of hardwired into your brain so that you can kind of free up brain space to focus on what you're going to do in the right hand. So just practice and practice and practice, maybe just starting off left hand alone, then playing some chords in the right hand, but don't try to do too much too soon. You know, really get a feeling for that walking bass line. Fingers, very much up to you. Okay, so find fingers that are comfortable for you. If you look at what I was doing, I was going over an awful lot, and then when going, finger over thumb an awful lot. Okay, and then when I changed chord, I was doing it some more. So frequently things like this. And what we're aiming for is smoothness. So I've got myself in a tricky spot there because I've ended up with my third on a D and a bit of a jump to come down. Okay, so figure out the fingers that are comfortable for you. Playing jazz, playing blues. Yes, fingering really matters. But good fingering is all about being as efficient as possible. Yeah, so figure out those fingers that work best for you, because those are the kind of shapes where things are going to be different depending on your hand size. Okay, I've got quite a small hand, so I do quite a bit of sort of finger switching and moving over and that kind of thing. Okay, you might have bigger hands, it might be different. Second thing to bear in mind, and this is all about the style, stay away from the pedal. If you find yourself in a situation like I did there with my third on the D, oh dear, I need to get back down to the F. The temptation is just to cover things up with a sustain pedal. Okay, if you can, stay away from the pedal for this style. Okay, things get a bit mushy, a bit mulchy. This kind of blues piano is very much kind of about the percussive style. Yeah, so just stay away from that sustain pedal if you can. Okay, one more thing. You will find it very easy to go off tempo with a walking bass. It's one of the most difficult aspects of the style, actually. So if you run a metronome against what I did just then, you'll probably find that I just got slightly quicker over the course of the improvisation, yeah, because I tend to get quicker rather than slower. Just be aware of that risk. One thing you can do is play against a click track or a metronome, and that's fine. However, I would wait until you've got the basic thing under your fingers before you try that. One of the problems with click tracks and metronomes, they're great for keeping you in time, but they are absolutely rigid, even more rigid than a drummer would be, okay? And you can get so focused on being absolutely on time, absolutely on the beat, because that's the click track in your ear, that's what it's telling you to do, that your improvisation really loses quality and you can get frustrated very easily. That's why I recorded with that click track. Then I could have recorded it with a click track, but I'd have done like 100 takes trying to get it absolutely right. Better just to get it down, get comfortable with it, and then practice with the very strict rhythm later. The first time I played through the improvisation, all I did in my right hand was muck about with chord shapes. So that was the shape I was typically using over an F chord, and as you can see, it is basically just an F chord in its first inversion. So there's root position, first inversion, and I was also dropping in a D for a bit of colour. Okay, a really important thing in jazz and in blues is we take our chords and we extend them, we develop them, we enrich them. Yeah, so very rarely do we just play an F chord. Typically we would go for something like an F6 or an F9, something like that. It kind of depends on the style, on the genre. When we get into jazz, things get, we can really go crazy with chords. Blues tends to use a slightly more limited vocabulary of chords, but we're still always trying to enrich, trying to get an interesting bluesy sound out of them. So I was using that chord, and all I was doing was, as I said, playing around with the rhythm. So those are my first 4 bars or something like it, yeah? Notice how much time my hand is spending off the keyboard. a kind of beginner's error with improvisation is thinking that, oh, you know, I have to be playing all the time. Everything I play has to be really complicated. It has to be really crazy. I have to put in loads of fancy runs and messing about and all that kind of thing. And you don't. Yeah, you can do an awful lot with just a tiny little bit of, a tiny little bit of the toolkit there. Okay, so I'm creating quite a satisfying musical effect there, just by using that right hand chord. And then when the chord changed in the left, I just changed chord shapes. Okay, and the ones I used were B flat 7, like there, and that, which kind of implies a B flat 9. So I've taken the B flat 7 chord and just added the C in there, the 9th. Again, I'm looking for extra colour. I'm seeing what I can do. Now, once you've got the left hand down pat, okay, if you're familiar with blues scales and things like that, and if you've improvised in the past, that's fine. But if you are new, just play around with some chords in the right and pick some really simple ones, if you like, and just work on your rhythms. Okay, see what you can do. Try and get a feel for that swinging bluesy groove. One thing that you hopefully will find yourself doing is indulging in a bit of kind of rhythmic anticipation, where the chord in the right comes in ahead of the beat. 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay, you see how that chord there came in just before the start of that third bar. That is anticipation is a very, very common rhythmic technique in jazz and blues, and it's quite kind of difficult to teach, but you should find as you begin to get comfortable, as your hands work better together, playing the left hand and the chords, you should find if you're into the kind of groove, that should come fairly naturally. Also, play around with your voicings, your inversions, just see what sounds you can make in the right hand with those chord shapes. Don't worry if you don't know the names of the chords, just try playing different shapes and see what happens. Drop in weird notes and see what they do. That's quite a good one. That's something like F7 with a sharp 9th, and you could use that quite easily in a blues. Second time through the 12-bar sequence, I played some melodic improvisation. Now, the notes I was using to improvise on were all taken from the F blues scale. Now, typically when you're playing blues, and this goes for jazz as well, you won't stick to just one scale, okay? I could have played a whole 12-bar blues improvising on nothing but the F blues scale. But typically you drop in notes from other scales as well, notably the pentatonic. So there's F pentatonic, yeah, and even one or two others, just to give you a little bit of colour. Now, the technique that I was using that second time through was to limit the number of notes that I used in the improvisation. So I'd gone from just using simple chords like that to using a limited number of notes, and I just used 4 different notes. Now, this is something I've talked about before, and it's a really important idea if you're just getting into improvisation. The way to start with improv is small. Limit yourself. Just use 2, 3, or 4 notes. And that's what I was trying to demonstrate that second time through. I was just using D, F, G, and A over all of the chords in the left. So you could have a go at that. You'll find that you really need your left hand absolutely down pat. You need it really memorized to start working on that stuff in the right hand, yeah, because that will take up a lot of sort of brain power. If 4 notes is tricky at first, just use 2. Use D and F, or F and A flat, okay? But it's all about limiting yourself, yeah, and then gradually build out from there. Third time through, I played a much more kind of free-ranging improvisation in the right hand. It was very melodic, and I was mostly using notes from the F blues scale, which we just looked at, mixed in with notes from the F pentatonic scale. Okay, those were the notes that were really kind of at the heart of what I was doing. Now, when it comes to choosing the notes you can improvise on, and we'll talk in a second about how to build out to that kind of improvisation, when choosing the notes to improvise on, it's worth bearing in mind that nothing is really off limits, okay? The notes that I've just talked about there, F blues scale, F pentatonic scale, are going to be the ones that work most comfortably, but there are others there that you can use as well. So for example, the F sharp and the C sharp, they can slot in quite nicely. The C sharp is quite a nice slide up to the D. Okay, and the F sharp down to the F there, a little bit more edgy. You wouldn't want to overuse it, but those two are, as I say, by no means off limits. The one note in that scale to be careful of, the one note in between the two Fs to be careful of is the major seventh, the E natural. Not really idiomatic for blues playing, and it's the most unstable note in the scale, okay, in the major scale, in the minor scale, in any scale. The so-called leading tone, the note immediately before the tonic, is one that can always kind of get you in trouble. So in any kind of improvisation, it is the note to be most careful with. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't play it at all here, yeah, particularly when you're on the number 5 chord, the C in the left. You can play a C7 chord, which includes the E natural there. Okay, just be very careful, as I say, about including it in any kind of melodic improvisation. So those are the notes you can play, but how do you get to the point of creating that kind of improvisation? Well, it's quite straightforward, but it's kind of a brute force approach that you need to take. If you're improvising comfortably on your 4 notes, just build out one at a time. Maybe add B flat, then add C, then add E flat, okay, and see where it goes. So you improvise on 5 notes, then on 6 notes, and then on 7 notes, and it might take you several weeks of gradually building out to get something that sounds reasonably fluid, and find out what kind of sounds right. The way to learn this stuff, and I say this in practically every tutorial that I make, the way to learn this stuff is to try it for yourself and to trust your ears. Don't get too bogged down in the theory of this is the scale, this note's in the scale, this note's not in the scale, I can use this, I can't use that. Much better to actually take your hands to the keyboard, play, and listen to the sound that you make. Okay, so that's about it for another tutorial. I hope that was useful. I like to come back to the blues every now and then because, as I say, it is a fantastic way into improvisation. I've got tons of other stuff on the blues, by the way, when we talk about some of these techniques in more detail. So do have a look at my, a search through my old videos. If you can't find anything, ping me a message, or just go into YouTube and search Bill Hilton Blues, and loads of stuff will come up. As usual, I will say, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, just hit the little red button down there in the bottom right hand corner of the screen to subscribe. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I'll put links in the description text underneath the video. If you could support me on patreon.com/Bill Hilton, my crowdfunding website, that would be great, even if it's just to the tune of kind of $3 a month or whatever. All that funding is really helpful because it allows me to keep making tutorials like this. And of course, check out my book, How to Really Play the Piano, the Stuff Your Teacher Never Taught You, which has a whole chapter on, starting to improvise with the blues, actually. So, if you're just starting out with this kind of thing, you're just getting your head around chords and improvisation on the piano, that book will help you. You do need to be able to read a little bit of sheet music, right hand and left hand, but, nothing very complicated. And if you can, it should give you a flying start into this kind of music. Okay, there we go. I'll have another tutorial coming very soon. I'll see you then.